Hey, what's good? This is Dismantling the Narrative with CMB 613. Thanks for checking out the channel where we bust open false narratives. If you end up agreeing with what AI me is saying and/or learned something, please like and subscribe. If you disagree, please let me know in the comments what you think I got wrong. Thank you. Now, let's get into this.
Okay, so you've probably seen the headlines, right? Canada is facing an aging crisis. It's a story that sounds pretty alarming, painting this picture of a future where our social systems are totally on the brink of collapse. Today, we're going to dig into the numbers and see if that story actually holds up. And this is the official story right here, in a nutshell. It's a really powerful statement that suggests this tough, strange future, and it's often presented like it's just this inevitable fact of life. But is it the whole story? Let's take a closer look.
All right, so to figure out if this crisis is for real, we first have to get a handle on the argument itself. What's the actual evidence they're using for this looming demographic disaster?
The entire aging crisis argument really hinges on this one key idea, the dependency ratio. The easiest way to think about it is like a seesaw. On one side, you've got all the workers who are paying into the system, and on the other, you have the retirees who are drawing from it. The whole theory is, if that seesaw gets too lopsided, we're in big trouble.
But what if those official projections are missing a few key details? You know, when we actually look at the real-world data, a very, very different picture starts to emerge. This is where it gets interesting.
I mean, demographics are incredibly complex, right? So can one simple number, one ratio, truly capture the future of an entire country? As it turns out, the answer is way more complicated than you might think.
And here it is. This is the number that kind of changes everything. Right now, in Canada, for every single retiree, there are 2.8 workers. So is that good? Is that bad? Let's break down what that actually means.
Well, it turns out that a ratio of 2.8 is actually considered pretty healthy. It's a sustainable balance that suggests our system isn't about to just fall apart. In fact, if anything, it's a sign of a pretty stable situation, demographically speaking.
And you know, there's another piece to this puzzle. Even if you take immigration completely out of the equation, Canada's population is still growing on its own. Just look at the chart. Births still outnumber deaths every year. It's not some massive boom for sure, but it is a long, long way from a bust.
So, if the actual numbers look pretty good, then where on earth are all these dire warnings coming from? Well, it turns out the official models are built on some assumptions that, well, they don't quite line up with the real world. Let's unpack those.
You see, that simple dependency ratio is a pretty blunt tool. It completely overlooks a ton of real-world stuff. For instance, it doesn't account for people who sadly pass away before they even get to retirement, or all the retirees who move or spend their winters abroad. It also ignores that seniors today are often way healthier and more independent. And this one is huge. It totally misses the massive impact of technology on how much a single worker can get done. Let's just zoom in on one of those factors for a second. Every single year, around 90,000 Canadians pass away before they even reach the age of 65. That's a really sobering number, and it has a massive impact on that dependency ratio we were talking about.
So what this really means is that not every worker becomes a retiree. It's not a one-for-one trade. The official models, they often assume this simple, clean transition, but reality is just, well, it's a lot messier. This one factor alone seriously changes the long-term math.
So we're not just talking about making some minor tweaks here. The entire model that's used to predict this so-called crisis might be fundamentally flawed. It's a classic case of a simple, neat model versus a complex, messy reality.
This slide really lays it all out, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the clean, simple assumptions of the official models. But then on the right, well, that's real life. People move, their health is a huge factor, and thanks to technology, one worker today can be way more productive than a worker from 50 years ago.
So what's the bottom line here? The dependency ratio can be a useful number to look at, sure, but it's a blunt tool. When you use it without thinking about all these other real-world factors we've been talking about, you can end up with a really distorted and unnecessarily scary picture of the future. And this intense focus on a crisis often leads to one and only one solution being pushed: mass immigration. But as this slide points out, that might be more about political messaging than anything else. There are other strategies out there, like finding ways to boost productivity or making our healthcare system more efficient, that often get completely ignored in the conversation.
So after all that, what's the big takeaway? We've looked at the official story, and we've looked at the data that seems to tell a different one.
let's put all the pieces together for a final thought.
I think the main conclusion is pretty clear. Once you actually account for all these real-world factors, like premature deaths, people moving, and productivity gains, the whole aging crisis narrative starts to look really overblown.
The reality seems to be that Canada's demographic situation is far more stable than the scary headlines would have you believe. That worker-to-retiree ratio is actually sustainable, and the country is not on the verge of some kind of demographic collapse.
You know, in the end, this isn't just a story about numbers on a page. It's a story about how we interpret data. So maybe the real question isn't whether we have enough people. Maybe the real question is whether we're critical enough about the numbers we're shown and the stories we're told.